Hey Max Impactors, this is Sensei Tim Rosanelli with you. Today's video is going to be a live video on some of the gardening things that I'm doing, and the title of this is things that I'll never need to buy again. All right, I am on over the last couple of years. I've been on a quest for kind of self-reliance. I always wanted to be one of those guys who kind of like lived off grid and produced everything I needed to live. Now, as life went on, I think I've told you this in another video, as life went on, I had a job and things like that that were commitments that made it so that I couldn't really fully venture into that dream. Now that my business is more established and things like that, I started to think about it again, maybe, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and thought that, maybe being off-grid or self-reliant isn't just, being on or off. It's actually like a continuum. In other words, there's really unself-reliant, totally on the grid, totally reliant on, you getting everything from society, to the other aspect, which is totally off the grid. So in the last couple of years, I started to think about this more strategically and do everything I could to kind of start to do some things that would make me a little bit less reliant on, the grid. And I'm to the point, especially with my gardening, and I'm going to go over a lot of things that have to do with my gardening, that I discovered that I probably will never need to buy again. In other words, I'm not totally, I am still reliant. We get our electric from the grid and, a lot of things like that. But there are things in gardening that we've done over the years that means that we're not going to be reliant on certain things anymore. So I'm going to give you a list of all the things that I'll probably never need to buy again. The first one is garlic. In our garden, every year in the fall, I plant garlic, and the garlic grows through the winter and then comes up in the next spring, and then we harvest it. I braid the garlic, so there's other videos of me showing you how I braid it. I put it down in my basement, and now I'm to the point where I realize I probably never need to buy garlic again, because when I have it in my basement, you can just pull it off. It starts to dry, so it doesn't really go bad very quickly. It actually dries, and you can still use it just like fresh garlic. I actually have garlic still left over from 2 years ago that I'm finishing up on, and I still have last year's crop. And the other thing is, too, is I also take the previous year's crop and plant that in the garden to grow the next year. So I'm not even buying, cloves of garlic to plant in my garden anymore. So that's the first one, that thing that I'll never probably buy again. And I also take the dried garlic and I can grind it up and I make garlic powder. Now the second thing, and this is a really easy, almost anybody can do this, and that is start to grow herbs, okay? especially the perennial ones. If you start growing the perennial ones, you can do it in a pot or in a small, bed in your garden. I found that that's one of the best ways to, you'll never have to buy those kind of things again. The ones I'm talking about are things like oregano. Okay, once you grow oregano and it gets started, I'm telling you, in our garden, it just comes up every year. We have tons of oregano. I clip some in the fall. I hang them in our basement to dry, so we have dried oregano. Another one is thyme. We have tons of thyme. Do the same thing. I cut it, put it in my basement, let it dry, so I have dried thyme too. Sage is another one we do, and rosemary. So those 4 herbs I'll probably never have to buy in the store again. Now, sometimes a year, you'll do a recipe and it might ask for fresh, and I might use my dried instead, but I'll never need to buy that again. Black beans. Okay, beans. So I grow dried beans, and I use a black bean. It's called Trail of Tears, and we grow that in the garden. I do a square foot garden. I do about 3 plots for 4 square feet of this black bean. They grow all summer into the fall. They dry. I take them and harvest all the dried black beans. And last year I had a few pounds worth of black beans, pretty much enough that it's going to last the whole year until we have another one, another batch that's grown. And I use the seeds and I regrow them because they are an heirloom, so we're never going to even have to buy those beans again. I do the same thing with a soup bean. I have a Hutterite soup bean that I grow every year. And the reason why is because my family traditionally has a bean soup we do every year for the Epiphany. And that soup, I grow these beans for and using that soup, and we always have plenty of leftovers where I replant them and regrow them every year. So a lot of the dried beans we'll probably never have to purchase again. The next thing is, tomatoes. This is an easy one. I mean, tomatoes. We grow plenty of tomatoes. Then I can them, in jars. And I'm going to probably do tomato sauce, like spaghetti sauce or tomato sauce this year. But we're just talking about chopped, diced, chopped tomatoes, and we canned them 2 years ago, and we have a ton left even now. Last year we even had a terrible year of tomatoes. We barely got any last year because of all the rain, and the weather was not really good for it that year. But we still have the tomatoes left from 2 years ago. So if we have a good crop this year and I do it again this year, those tomatoes will last several years. So I don't even have to worry about bad years of tomatoes. Another thing that we is totally free, kale. We do the Russian red style kale, which I really love it. We saute it. We do a lot of things with it. But we don't even have to plant it anymore because usually it comes up in the spring, makes seeds, and then it plants itself and then starts growing again. And I just use volunteers to grow the next year. So I'll have a bunch this spring. I'll see a bunch of volunteers. I know what they look like. I'll plant them in my garden. I'll use them through the spring and summer. And then when the fall comes around, the seeds, some of the plants that were left over from the year before, I let grow to seed. They seed again, and it's just constant cycle. So kale, I'll never need to buy the seeds again, I don't think. And I also will never need to buy kale again. Another one that we are able to get a lot of, and I'm almost to the point with carrots of this, but parsnips, since we don't use quite as many parsnips as carrots, we grow them all summer. When they're done growing, I use them for soups, things like that. The leftover ones we have, I chop up. I put into vacuum sealed bags, put them in my freezer so I can use them for soups and things like that all winter. And the size of the parsnips, I don't know why, but we just get really big parsnips here. I don't know. I mean, they're huge. I mean, they're like this thick, and they're pretty long, and just really good crop of them. Here's another thing: wood chip mulch. This is something we discovered. Well, I kind of knew about this, and now we're really doing this a lot. The wood chips. A lot of the local communities around here take the wood chips or take the branches off the trees and stuff along the roads, and then they chop them up. They also let people from the community bring their own branches and shrubs and brush and stuff like that, and then they chip them and they put them in a big pile and make them free, available to the local community. So we just go to this wood chip bin and we pretty much take as much wood chips as we want or need, and it's great because we save a lot of money doing that. It also made it so that now we don't have to really be concerned about the cost of the wood chips, the wood chip mulch, so that we can actually put it on thicker in all our beds. So our beds, we can really pile it on thick because it's no cost. It's just work. The same thing we have with compost. Now I have a huge compost bin. I don't know if I've ever showed you my compost bin, and I'm gonna have to show you my method too, because I use a pretty cool method of doing composting that works really good. Maybe during the summer I'll do a video for you. But compost, we get tons of compost ourselves, and our gardens are so big that sometimes I need even more than what I produce. Again, another local community, they collect all the leaves in the fall, they put them in big piles, they compost them down, and then they scoop it up and throw it into this free compost bin that the community can go over there and get and bring home. So we just get as much free compost as we want. I mean, this bin has plenty for almost anybody that wants it. I'm not going to tell you where, maybe, because I don't want everybody stealing all the compost, but you can find it, look it up online. But if you're not in our local area, just go online and look up, and you probably will find it if you do a Google search. The next one, disposable razors. So I started shaving probably about 10 years ago with the straight razor, and I just use a straight razor for my shaving. So I don't need to ever buy those disposable razors again. Even if you are buying disposable razors, I would suggest going to shaving soap instead of the shaving foam or gel that you get in the store. It just takes a brush, and then you brush it on, and you can still use the disposable razor to shave yourself, but it's a lot cheaper. I'm telling you that when I use it, it works a lot better than the foam. And I think the only reason why they have that foam in the gel is because it makes you purchase it more often. When I have the shaving soap will last me, if I'm using it regularly, it will last me a whole year, while a can will only last a couple months. And they're a lot more expensive. So I would suggest totally, if you don't want to get away from disposable razors, definitely go to shaving soap if you want to save money. Next one. Bales of straw. So bales of straw, we get a lot of free bales of straw. I just go around in the fall when everybody has decorations for Thanksgiving and Halloween. People buy bales of straw for decoration. And then after Thanksgiving, people just throw it right in the trash. So I just go around, and I get most of mine right from my local neighborhood. I go drive around my local neighborhood at trash day, and I usually get about 3-4 bales of hay just like that. I cover it up so it doesn't go bad, and then I save it for the next year. So we don't need to worry about that. Also, I get a lot of, for my compost, I get a lot of free leaves in the fall. So if I see a bag of leaves, I can bring that home and use that as compost. And when you see the way I compost, I need the greens from the grass and your home scraps, but I also use straw and dried leaves as the dry component to my compost bin. It's part of my composting strategy. So those two things it is really important for our strategy. The other thing is this year I've transferred everything I do on the computer to open source solutions, and I'm really into it now. I used to have, and this came about because I used to have Windows, I forget, Windows XP I think it was, and Microsoft stopped supporting it. So what happened was I had to actually buy 2 new computers because the software costs as much as getting a new computer. And that really kind of irritated me. And then I had the same thing happen with a Kindle HD that I had. A Kindle HD, all of a sudden they stopped supporting it and the thing was useless. So what I did was I went to open source versions of everything. So now instead of using Windows, I use Ubuntu for my computer operating system, and for my Kindle I started using this thing called Lineage OS, which actually changed the Kindle from the Kindle operating system to a Android Google operating system. And I actually like it better. It's awesome. It's really awesome as a Kindle Fire HD is awesome as a Android system. It's great. The other thing for my business that I changed up is you'll see a lot of things like I have to use QuickBooks, or maybe you're using Quicken. And a lot of these companies, instead of selling you software, are trying to force you to go onto their online solution so that you can't just use the software. I noticed at first started with the software, and every 3 years for QuickBooks, I would have to buy new software. The way they would force you to buy new software is they would stop supporting the bank downloads to the software, which would mean that you'd have to do everything manually and forcing you to buy the new software. Now they're making it so QuickBooks, you can't do the online downloads from your bank unless you automatic transfers from your bank unless you go into the online system. So that way they can charge you monthly for it, and it's, you know, the monthly fee, it would have like more than quadrupled my cost for running that software. So I went to an open source version called GNU Cash, GNU, okay, Cash, and I've been using that, and that's free. I can download my bank statements directly to the software. It works great once you figure out how to do it. It works a little different than QuickBooks, but it's awesome. And I think that as new updates come on this software, it'll just only get better. So that is another thing that we went to that is totally free, and I'm never gonna pay for again. All right, guys. Well, that's all I have for you today. So that's some of the things that are free that I'm never going to pay for again. If you have some other things that you have or do, put them down in the comments, because I want to see them, because maybe you have something that I don't quite do. I have other things that I'm kind of still half and half with. I do homebrew beer a lot, but I still sometimes, you know, have to buy beer. So that's another one that I'm working on. There's a lot of other things in the garden. Oh, and I'm also starting to build a lot of stuff with pallets. So a lot of the things, you've seen it over the last year, a lot of projects I've done with pallet wood. I'm getting more and more into it. So it's like, you know, if you start to use pallet wood for everything that you want, it almost makes things free too. So that may be another one that you can add to the list. All right, guys, I hope you like this. I'm going to end this video now. If you have any comments, comment below. Please like the video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. All right, thanks, Max Impactors, for watching, and we're going to see you in the next video.